Two new monster devices from China. The Huawei Mate 8 has a 1080p 6-inch display in an aluminium unibody. It's powered by Huawei's Kirin 950 chipset and will launch with a new version of Huawei's Emotion UI that is now based on Android 6. One advantage of the large form factor is a large 4000 mAh battery inside. While Xiaomi has launched the Redmi Note 3, also in aluminium and with a MediaTek Helio X10 processor. It has a 5.5-inch 1080p LCD display this time, and confusingly, it also comes in several storage and RAM variants. And it also packs a 4000 mAh battery and should be less than £200 if shipped to the UK. Now, Android geeks, imagine the classic Nexus 5, if you will, from 2013. Stock Android, Snapdragon 801, 5-inch 1080p screen, but picture it all in sumptuous metal and Gorilla Glass 3 front and back. Add a much better speaker. Add a gorgeous AMOLED screen. Add capacitive buttons to save on real estate, add a bigger battery, add an extra gig of RAM, add a micro SD slot. That's basically what the OnePlus X is, albeit 2 years down the road from the Nexus Classic, but the improvements are real and pretty compelling, plus the price is under £200 in the UK and extremely competitive probably wherever you are. Wow. Something's got to give, of course, but the showstoppers here aren't serious, don't worry. The build and materials used are top-notch. The metal surround is nicely ridged, presumably for grip, of which more in a moment, while the glass front and back curve gently towards each edge and the corners are nicely rounded. The glass has an oleophobic coating, in fact a seriously slippery surface. It does make fingerprints trivial to wipe off, thankfully, but it also makes the OnePlus X an extremely slippery customer. As it sits on a desk or table, you'll go into the next room, you'll hear a thud, and yes, it's on the floor again. In fact, as you're holding it, you'll find it sliding out of your grip. I'm pressing quite hard here. It's hard enough to activate the 3D touch on an Apple iPhone, for example, and yet I can feel it going every single time. The solution is to stick a $5 TPU case on it, but then what's the point in all this lovely metal and glass? It's a design decision which is absolutely baffling, but as long as you're careful, then you can't help but admire the construction here. Despite the super thin form, only 7mm, OnePlus has fitted a 2500 mAh battery with micro USB to feed it here. Surprise, given the trials of USB Type-C in the OnePlus 2. But I'm not complaining. No Qi charging at this price point, of course, or even quick charge compatibility, so best rely on nightly recharges. Also down the bottom are a pair of speaker grills, though only the left one has a component behind it. The right is just a dummy. Speakerphone, music, podcast quality is pretty good. If all phone speakers were like this, I wouldn't actually have to remark on this aspect in other reviews. It's not the loudest ever. Bit of classic Floyd. It's not the loudest ever, it's not the highest quality ever, but it's perfectly good enough, again, if all phone speakers were like this. In addition to the usual power and volume buttons here on the right, the left side has a 3-way slider that controls notifications. That's all, priority and none, which is superb. Back in the early days of smartphones, I grew to rely on the handspring trio mute button. Then this got adopted by the Apple iPhones, but most phones since then have relied on software controls, all on pressing and holding the volume buttons. To have a physical mute button on an Android smartphone, and with some granularity too, I know Facebook and emails, but do let my family call through, is very refreshing. And well done to OnePlus for going down this route. Well done too for the screen, which is clear and colourful in all light conditions. A typical AMOLED affair with perfect blacks, of course, tying in well with the default dark theme and the black screen surrounds. You will still get a shock when things like Gmail launch, of course, or Chrome with full white. Web browsing I can understand, but when is Google going to implement a dark theme for Gmail? AMOLED also helps for Android 5's ambient display. Just wave your hands over the proximity sensor and up pop any recent notifications ready for tapping on. They also pulse in as they arrive, of course, with minimal power use. Now, below the excellent screen are capacitive Android controls. There we are, I just triggered one. Almost a rarity these days away from the world of Samsung. These work perfectly, but are almost impossible to make out with the naked eye under quite a few lighting conditions, so you have to resort to kind of guessing their locations. In fairness, you learn these in 30 seconds flat, and they do have large hotspots, so going back home or bringing up recent apps is never an issue. But it would have been nice, OnePlus, to have been able to see the icons. Maybe use some reflective material next time if you can't afford to put in backlights. The alternative is to use on-screen controls, which work absolutely fine Nexus style, though I do prefer to keep them off and have the full 5 inches for displaying content go away again. Still, it's great to have the choice here, courtesy of Oxygen OS. Oxygen what? I hear you splutter. Don't worry, it's stock Android plus a few bells and whistles, in the same manner as Cyanogen, which I've covered before. In fact, there's an even lighter layer over the Android open source project code than Cyanogen, with the only additional applications being SwiftKey and a rather modern, in a good way, FM radio utility. Although SwiftKey is great and all that, the OnePlus X actually has the stock Google keyboard as its default, and I love this to bits. So well done all round, and options are plenty. The two main software additions to Android are firstly Shelf, occupying the usual experimental off to the left home screen slot with a weather summary, shortcuts to recently used applications and to frequently contacted people. It's nicely done, and I found myself using it each day. And secondly, a range of always-on touchscreen gestures for controlling common actions with the display turned off. Repeat, off. Tracing a circle turns the phone on with camera ready for action. Doing a V shape turns the LED torch function on and off. And the two chevron character shapes go forwards and backwards a track and play music. These are genuinely innovative ideas and yet again work well. There's obviously a lot more that OnePlus and specifically the Oxygen OS team can do to add gestures and fill out the shelf screen. I'm sure updates will follow in due course. This is still early days for the Oxygen skin. The application suite here is so stock, so minimal that some reviewers have been left scratching their heads as to how to play media on microSD. The trick is to use the device folders function in Google Photos, which works perfectly. But I grant you it's not exactly obvious. An easy solution is to install one of the many excellent third-party media players such as MX Player. Music is handled well by Google Play Music, though again there are plenty of third-party alternatives in the Play Store. The microSD support is in addition to the integrated 16GB disk, with the card slotting in neatly into a dual slot tray that ejects from the OnePlus X's right side here. Or you can use this for a second nano SIM if you so wish, but not both, which is a little bit of a compromise that may put someone away from Western markets off the device. Imaging is a little underwhelming, and the results are absolutely as you'd expect for a no-frills 13 megapixel rear phone camera in 2015. Nicely detailed, decent colours, but all going somewhat to pot when light levels get low, there's no OIS, and subjects start moving. A single LED flash and only an f/2.2 aperture. The camera is supposed to have phase detection autofocus, but it still wasn't anywhere near as fast to focus as other phone cameras I've tried recently. Average seek time for focus was in the order of a second when going from macro to distance, for example. There is special interest here in OnePlus's multi-shot clear image facility. This isn't explained in the UI, but essentially 10 shots are taken in a fraction of a second, and then these are combined over about a second or so of processing to reduce digital noise and increase clarity, potentially useful in low light. Annoyingly, this can't be then combined with the existing multi-shot HDR facility also on board, so you have to plump for one or the other. Given that the use cases for clear image, that's low light mainly, and HDR, high light levels, are mutually exclusive, why on earth can't we have a Sony-esque superior auto mode or the like that uses multiple shots and then decides for itself what to do with them without the user having to look, think, analyze, decide, and then tap a couple of times, potentially for every shot? These are supposed to be smartphones, so let's have smarter camera software, please, OnePlus. The front-facing camera is better than average, 8 megapixel resolution, and with just the one extra, a beauty mode to iron out my blemishes and wrinkles. Oh yes. At the top right of the phone is a notification LED, and like classics in the past, it's multicolored. In fact, Oxygen OS lets you select any color you like for notifications, plus any color again for the various battery charging states. It's only a short step from here to different colors for different types of notifications, so we'll see what updates come along these lines. So back to my Nexus 5 comparison 2 years on, but with a veritable raft of style, spec and component improvements where it matters, and for a distinctly lower mid-range price. What's the catch? There is only one, and it's either trivial or a showstopper depending on your expectations of a smartphone. You see, like a lot of Chinese-made smartphones, NFC isn't included. I can only think the designers don't see a need, but I think they're being short-sighted since NFC, near-field communications, is crucial to Android Pay taking off. Plus, I do like pairing with accessories, with a tap, transferring audio, copying content from phone to phone, that sort of thing. And NFC makes all of this possible, or at least a heck of a lot easier, and all for the sake of a $1 component, at most. Or you could argue that, heck, you don't use NFC much now, so why would you need it on your oh-so-shiny new OnePlus X? In which case, you've just found yourself a premium smartphone at a bargain price. Performance was generally great thanks to the 3 gig of RAM, though minor stutters in games here and the odd flicker in the interface when dragging stuff around show that, again, the Oxygen OS team have some work to do in optimizing their code for this particular device. I'm impressed so far, though, and I have confidence that updates will arrive. NFC aside, plus a worry about the OnePlus X making a bid for freedom from any level surface in your home or office, the only remaining hurdle is the frustratingly quirky invite system for buying the OnePlus X in the first place. Now, anyone watching this is likely to have enough geek friends that have spare invites from social media, but the man in the street has no chance. So I'm going to be the umpteenth reviewer to advise OnePlus to run a traditional ordering and pre-ordering system for their smartphones. It's okay to say, sorry, we're out of stock sometimes, OnePlus. It's how grown-up companies do business.